If there is one of the weirdest questions I have been asked when I've gone to a racetrack to drift or pretend to drift, I would say the most confusing thing is always, what is the difference between drifting a left-hand drive car versus a right-hand drive car? And I stare at them inquisitively because, quite honestly, I'm just trying to make it around the track and I never even think twice about which side of the car I'm actually on. But it does make sense because when we're out there with Torque Motorsport with the GR86 that we have, I am sitting on the left side of the car. When I go out the very next day to do some content for myself, I am running around in a 1996 Nissan Gloria right-hand drive car. So it did start to make me question just what are some of the differences I had to keep in mind as I jumped from car to car, which I figured I would share with you because some of the differences are actually kind of weird. By the way, I'm Alex Martini with 2 underscores on Instagram. I'm over here on Torque Motorsport to talk about drifting and all things that have to do with Torque Drift 2, the free-to-play game that's available over on the Epic Game Store that you can download right now. You can play with your controller or on a sim rig, and we have a huge update coming out in the middle of March that takes into account more optimization, more cars, more parts so that you can modify your car with your friends however you want, which is a super exciting thing. But I want to get back into this because one of the wildest things I will always tell people when it comes down to drifting a right-hand drive car is getting used to not necessarily the steering wheel being on the right, it's the turn stalks that are behind the steering wheel. You have, or I have, I would like to say, a dominant and a non-dominant hand. And when I'm sitting in my left-hand drive car, my non-dominant hand is always the thing that's shifting, right? I'm a left-handed guy, take that how you want, but I'm a lefty. So when I'm driving around, I've gotten really accustomed to this behavior. My right hand kind of doing everything and my left hand really controlling where the steering wheel is going. The biggest thing I've learned is that when I'm in the right-hand drive car, it takes me at least like an hour and a half to get reaccustomed to the fact that I'm shifting with my left and I'm trying to bring my hand back up to either the steering wheel or to the inline hydro that I have. I will say though, 9 times out of 10, when you see me like overcorrecting in the Gloria, I almost always hit my windshield wipers. It is just a thing. The very first thing you get when you actually buy a right-hand drive car is you will mess up the turn signals a billion times. You will tell yourself that you won't mess it up, you will mess it up, you'll look like an idiot, but it's fine, everyone does it. I will say that's been the wildest thing in terms of a difference for me. Now, when you're actually sitting in the car, you may not think it makes much of a difference in terms of like how you enter a turn. I will say I've taken the same cars to US Air before, which is where we spend a lot of our time up here in Wisconsin practicing drifting and all that sort of good stuff. And I will say that the only time I've noticed a larger difference on what side of the car that I sit on is when we're trying to run around the track for grip. When you're running around the track for grip, I've noticed that being on the right-hand side of the car is just, for some reason or another, it just feels a little better. Now, when I run intermediate, it seems like I'm taking a lot of right-handed turns. So I don't know if that actually means anything. And if you go out on the internet, there's actually a huge amount of people that will argue if a left-hand drive car or a right-hand drive car is actually better competitively for racing. I will say this, getting in a car, drifting right-hand drive compared to left-hand drive, absolutely no difference in terms of how the car feels when I go into a turn. The biggest thing for me though is getting reaccustomed to inputs. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I feel like my hands don't receive the same amount of stimulus. Like I'm more sensitive with my left hand than I am with my right hand when I'm driving or when I'm doing things. And so when I switch sides with it all, it does feel a little bit different. I'll notice a lot of times I'll actually misshift in the Gloria, which makes me feel like an idiot, but most of the time my issue comes from the turn stuff. I will say the biggest other thing that I'll notice between left-hand drive cars and right-hand drive cars, which is kind of like a prickly thing to say, is like most of the tracks that I've gone to in terms of sliding around, they're almost all exclusively built for like you to be on the left-hand side of the car. So getting used to like reaching over to grab something or grab a ticket to go in or talk to the person that's actually sending people out or talk to some of the staff people, it's always a little funny because like they'll lean in and they're like, wait a minute, and then look, we'll walk around to the other side and be like, oh, hey, what's going on? And I know right-hand drive cars, not that rare anymore, everybody's importing them, but it is still common enough to where you see maybe for every 15 left-hand drive cars, you'll see 1 right-hand drive car at a drift event. Now, I will say, I think the most common question I get of all between the 2 cars is with drifting, it seems like there's a little bit of a style involved. There's a little bit of swagger, if you will. And of course, I do love the Toyota GR86. It's awesome, it performs, it feels very snappy. I feel more confident in this car, to be completely honest. I can put it in places I want to more. It's a little bit slower, so I'm not burning through tires as fast. Gloria, it's a cool looking thing. Like, it's just a big bean. It's just white and it's out there and people don't know what they're looking at when they see it. So it has the style thing, which a lot of times some people will ask me like, hey, where'd you get that? Because I want to drift a Gloria, like I want to drift a right-hand drive car. I want to go through that. And I will say this, it is a super cool feeling. It is pretty awesome. But that doesn't account for the fact that a lot of times it's more expensive. And I will say, when it comes down to drifting, if you're watching this or you're watching, car videos out there trying to decide which car to get, keep the car that you do choose the most basic, most widely accessible, cheapest that you can possibly find car, because the number one thing that matters above all else, it's not about how you look while you're out there, it's all about seat time. So if you can find a Nissan 350Z that looks absolutely hashed together, that's just trying to pass on into the next life and you won't let it because you want a drift car, go pick that up. Don't save up for a Nissan Gloria, because all of those cars are actually automatic. We had to put a CD09 in there, we had to put a COS 2-way diff, we had to change the hubs, we had to go to S chassis front or S13 fronts and S14 rears. The whole thing was just, it was a lot of fun, it was a lot of work, but it definitely doesn't make it a very affordable thing. And a lot of times right-hand drive cars are like almost 40% more expensive, I would say, when you get into the nuts and bolts of the whole thing in comparison to your left-hand drive counterparts. But that's not to say that driving them feels the same. I will say, driving the LG RHD, it does feel better, it feels more natural, it just feels way more accustomed to what I'm typically used to, but that doesn't mean I don't try to be a stubborn little asshole and try to make the right-hand drive car work. But if you guys have any questions on right-hand drive cars or their comparable left-hand drive differences, let me know below. I know this is kind of a weird video, just wanted to talk about it because it seemed like a fun one. Plus, with spring coming around, we got more parts that we're installing on the GR86. We have more episodes of that coming to you, so you're gonna wanna stay subscribed. And of course, if you don't have Torque Drift 2 downloaded just yet, you can download it for free on the Epic Game Store. I'm Alex Martini with 2 underscores on Instagram. We'll see you on the next one. Adios.